I would have people come to me and say, gosh, I'm so inspired by what you've done, or I would love to start a business of my own. I would love to have the freedom that I can tell you have. But in the next breath, they would tell me the reasons why they couldn't, the reasons why they were afraid. And all I heard every single time, we'd be like sitting at coffee just like this. And I would reach across the table and I'd take their hands and I'd be like, everything you're saying is what we're all experiencing.
Welcome to the podcast, Lindsey Schwartz. She is an author, an investor, a master community builder, and the founder of Powerhouse Women. She is fiercely committed to supporting other women. Lindsey invests her time in mentoring them, and actually girls of all ages, from high-achieving entrepreneurs to high school students. So she saw so many women in her life stop short of pursuing their own entrepreneur dreams because of fear and self-doubt. And she knew that she started to have this need inside of her to have honest conversations about the ups and downs of entrepreneurship. And so she's here today to talk to us about how she's built this amazing community, how she puts on these sold out live events that even include pajama parties, okay? And how she's also just been able to keep a thriving marriage and become a real estate investor. So I'm so excited to talk to Lindsey. Welcome.
Thanks, girl.
I'm so excited.
I know, this is long overdue. We got to record for my podcast yesterday.
Yes.
We're doing a double dip.
And we've known each other for so long. I don't know how you haven't come on the podcast.
I know. I was saying that to you yesterday, but it's perfect.
I know, because I feel like right now, what you're focused on, you're becoming an events company. Mm-hmm. And that's what a lot of people want to get into. So I want to dive into how'd you get to this new transition. You're in a new spot. How'd you give yourself permission to pivot, right? But first, we go way back because of network marketing. Mm-hmm. So I kind of want to share that story because that was a whole 10 versions ago.
I was going to say it's 3 hair colors ago. Yeah. So that's how you know how long it's been. But it was.
How did you, why did you get started in network marketing? Mm-hmm. What drew you to that industry?
So what's really cool is a lot of, I think, what people are afraid of right now with, gosh, is the economy slowing down? Are things changing? That was what propelled me into entrepreneurship in the first place. So I don't know if you know this about me, that I sold carpet. That was what I did before.
No, okay. I did not know that.
It's so fun when you get to learn those things about that's how I met my husband, Elliot. We both worked for this flooring manufacturer. And what happened was I was new in that career.
Yeah.
I was great living the corporate dream. I was actually super happy with that. But then 2007, 2008 happened, and commercial construction, which was the industry we were in, was hit the hardest. It was the first time in my life I literally had the thought, maybe I need a plan B.
Oh, wow.
So eventually found network marketing as that plan B. I never was laid off during that time, which I'm super grateful for, but it just showed me that the things that I was putting my safety and security in, this job, could actually be taken away. I grew up in the Midwest, so it was very much the American dream is you get a great job with great benefits and you work there for 30, 40 years. And I was great, check that box. But then when things change, you realize maybe that's not always the case. Mm-hmm. So network marketing kind of came into my life at the perfect time. I was not skeptical. I had no preconceived notions at all. I was just really open.
Ideal person.
I really was. And you know what was really cool about it? Because this will tie into my story about hosting events. The first time I went to an event, it was walking into a room of these people where I was where have they been all my life?
Aww, you
especially
felt at home.
Because commercial construction, this is going to not surprise anyone, can be really negative. Mm-hmm. I mean, on a daily basis, I was a 24-year-old, 25-year-old girl in my first corporate career, and I would get cussed out by these grown men on a regular basis. Just the construction industry is really intense. So going from that to this environment where people are giving you high fives and hugs, and it's so based in personal development, I was I drank the Kool-Aid, and I'm on subscription for life. And it started to nurture this idea that maybe I could be paid to do something that I actually love. And it really was that simple.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's funny as you said that, because I was thinking about my first time that I went to an event and I walked out because I was this is not it
crazy
for me.
And
what in the heck?
I was probably the one fist bumping.
You were really on the chairs. Yeah. But it's so interesting how so many people that is the number one way that they fall in love with the culture, because it's the quickest way to go, yeah, like these are my people, right? And for me, I always like was very much a self-protector. And so I'm like, I don't like, who are all these happy people and why are they high-fiving me? Like, you know, so it was like, eventually it took a while, but then I was the person standing on the chair, you know, excited too. I drank the Kool-Aid eventually. It took me a while. But events do that because you're around the right room of people who are excited about life. They're ambitious. And they, for some reason, they don't know you at all, but everybody in the room believes in everybody else in the room, right? Yep. And so it's such a beautiful thing. And I love that you got that from network marketing.
Isn't that crazy?
So you're like me, we transitioned out of it.
Yeah.
So tell me about that. Like, how hard was it? Because you have a team. Like, so for people that aren't listening in, when you're in network marketing, like, it's not just like you decide you're going to change careers. Like, you have kind of people to answer to on your team. Like, I want to do something different. Yeah. So how'd that go?
So interesting, because it was one of the most powerful lessons of my life, because I waited way too long to make the decision and it got painful. I think when we're being called to make a transition, when we're being called to step into something new, Patrice Washington, a friend of ours, was just speaking at an event. And she talked about how first it comes in like this little whisper. It's like someone throws a pebble at you and it's like, hey, this isn't for you forever. I'm going to need you to be obedient. Yeah. And then if you don't listen to that, the rock comes and then eventually the boulder. And so unfortunately, I didn't listen until like the boulder stage. But what was happening was, it was a lot of what you're saying. I was so afraid of disappointing people. I was afraid of listening to the call that I felt. And I do believe that God was calling me to something bigger. But all I would think about is the people who kept expecting me to show up in that same way. So of course, I mean, if I was dealing with decades of people-pleasing tendencies, that was the exact lesson I was supposed to learn. And it was painful. It eventually led to getting kicked out of this like big Facebook group that I started, you know, and I say that like now I can laugh about it because now looking back, I'm like, oh yeah, okay. It was because I didn't listen. So I knew for about 2 years that I was ready to move on to something else, but I didn't know what that something else was. And I think that's really challenging too. It's when we might know that we're being called in another direction, but there's not like this clear pathway, right? Or a map, or
there's not a book you can buy.
Yeah, 1 through 1,000 that you can take. But how it happened for me, I had ended up in a season of just like really searching. I decided to write a book. You and I are both like self-published authors. Yeah. That was our first book. And that process really taught me over the course of a year. It really had me undo a lot of these limiting beliefs and a lot of self-sabotage. And when the book came out, it was really, so my book was called Powerhouse Women, just one. And it was really about how we all have these gifts inside of us. We all have this message, because what was happening is in network marketing, I don't know if you ever felt this way, but part of the culture is really celebrating the achievements, the milestones that you reach.
Right.
But we're all still struggling along the way. We all have things that are hard, but you almost feel like you can't share those because you're supposed to be attracting new people with this story of like, look at my success.
Right.
And not to say that it's tricky, right? Because that there is something to that. But at the same time, I would have people come to me and say, gosh, I'm so inspired by what you've done, or I would love to start a business of my own. I would love to have the freedom that I can tell you have. But in the next breath, they would tell me the reasons why they couldn't, the reasons why they were afraid, the reasons why they didn't think they knew the right people. And all I heard every single time, we'd be like sitting at coffee just like this, and I would reach across the table and I'd take their hands and I'd be like, everything you're saying is what we're all experiencing on a daily basis. And it made me realize we're not sharing enough of like the real stuff that goes on behind the scenes. So these women who are being called by God to do something bigger, by their higher power to step into their purpose, they're not, because they're looking at everyone else and thinking, we all have it all together. And I was like, I wish more people were telling that side of the story. And then I just felt really convicted. Well, are you telling that side of the story? So the book was like the first point to just really start talking more openly about like, yes, there's been success, but I still feel like an imposter sometimes.
Yeah.
Even
absolutely.
Today. And this was 7 years ago. So the book came out. That was the thing that I didn't really believe I could do. And I think in that, it really changed my whole life. And it showed me that that's actually where God wanted me. He wants me on that edge of things that I don't know that I can control by myself, that it's going to require faith for me to take that next step. And ultimately we can, fast forward to what has come from it is like this event and this community, but I never had that plan. I just had this feeling in my heart that I wasn't challenging myself, and it took doing the thing I really thought I had no business doing, which was writing a book.
I love that, because it's encouraging so many people that are listening in right now that think that once you get to the top, or once, they would look at you and go, she's at the top of her success. She's never struggles with fear or doubt or imposter syndrome. And here you're like, yeah, I still have it. I know I still get it too. And, but what happens is when you start taking bold steps of faith and you start to get a little, momentum happening in your life, then it becomes clearer what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
I want to talk about that because so you write the book. Do you have an event next? Is that what comes next?
Okay, so I did this hybrid self-publishing whole scenario where I was part of a group, kind of like this little online mastermind for first-time authors. If I had not been in that group, I would have quit. I actually tried to quit, but it was like the accountability. I was invested financially. And what happened when the book was ready to come out, my publisher, the person putting together the program, said, well, a lot of authors will do a book launch event to celebrate the book and get some publicity. And I was like, okay, well, doing an event all about me sounds terrible. I just was I wasn't comfortable at all stepping into like a spotlight, but I also knew deep down, I think that my actual spiritual gift is creating community. So I think even at that stage, I knew that I was just speaking for a much larger audience. So I said, well, I guess we could have this group of women come together. Maybe we could all share stories. We could have different people, different experiences. But my vision was so small, Cayla. My initial vision for that event was to have it in someone's living room, like 20, 25 people. But little by little, I just started to lean into that feeling like if it's not really stretching me, then it's just staying within more of what I know.
Yeah,
so eventually kind of like, right? Oh my gosh, that's so funny. I didn't even think of it that way. Eventually, I booked a little hotel conference space. We ended up having 100 women at that first event.
That's amazing.
It was amazing. And I still to this day don't know how a lot of them found it. I'm being honest. But it was that obedience of stepping into the vision that felt like it was just a little bit outside of what I could see myself. Mm-hmm. And that's what ultimately really changed everything. Because what it does is it has you show up differently.
Yes.
You have to transform into the person who can handle that vision. And you're not doing it alone, of course. But so the first event was literally just to celebrate this book launch. And I'll never forget at the end, now we know if you're going to have an event, have another offer. People want to continue on.
Yeah.
And I remember standing on stage and I was like, thanks for coming. Bye. And they were like, what's next? And I was like, quite literally nothing. This is all I've got. And it was like this little 4-hour day. But I do remember something in my spirit at that point knew that this was the start of something. Mm-hmm. I just wasn't really quite ready to hold that vision. So it took me maybe 6 months before I said, okay, I'll do another event and just kind of tiptoe into it that way. But yeah, it was never really supposed to be more than that one event.
So I loved what you said about having to become the person that can hold the capacity for 100 people, because if you would have just had it at somebody's house with 25 people, it would have felt just like a home party. Like you've been there, done that before. You might be talking about something different, but it's the same old Lindsey.
Yeah.
But on stage in front of 100 people talking about your book is something you've never done. And so you had to become another level. So for people right now who are still wanting to go into that comfort zone, right? They're like, I want to have the home party. I'm going to use that as an example because it feels very comfortable to them. And they don't quite know what it looks like to challenge themselves. Like what's an exercise that somebody can do to kind of figure out what is that next thing they need to try?
Oh, that's so good. Okay, well, a very simple way to do it is take whatever your current vision is and double it.
Ooh, okay.
So if I were to double it from that 25 to 30 people, all of a sudden I was like, well, that's kind of a big living room if it's like 60 to 75 people. So maybe I could figure out a way to have it at like an actual space. So take your vision and double it, whether it's your income goal for next year, or I would say if it's a time-bound goal, shrink the time in half.
Ooh,
and
good.
you wanna get to the point where you kind of want to puke.
Yeah.
That's literally the sign. If you feel like it starts to make you like sweaty under the armpits, and it should make you feel like I have no idea how I'm going to do this. That's because your current identity doesn't know how to do it. It's going to require you to step into a new identity. It's going to require you to probably accept a level of help that feels really uncomfortable right now.
Right.
This doesn't mean that you transform into Superwoman and you just do it all yourself. No, it actually, for me, has always involved accepting, asking for, and receiving a much more uncomfortable level of help than I wanted to.
Oh, okay. We got to talk about that because so many people, especially women, have trouble with receiving help. And that is one thing that I found, like every level I'm going to, it does require another who.
Yes.
You know, I need somebody else to help me because it's not going to be done by me alone. And what are some things maybe that you've done to step into that new identity of being somebody who can receive?
Okay, so again, some really practical ways.
I love it.
I had to get very honest with myself about how much I struggled to receive. And for any of you listening, if this is you, you're going to start to see this everywhere in your life. And it was almost shocking to me. And I had a little bit of shame around it. I had a little bit of sadness around it, I think. Just realizing how much help was available that I just wasn't allowing in. So first place I looked is, where am I unable to receive a simple thing like a compliment? So if someone would say, "Oh, I love your outfit," I would immediately deflect it in a very awkward way. Like I would either say like, "I got the outfit on sale," or I would like point out like, "Oh, but look, there's like this flaw right here," instead of just saying, "Thank you. You are complimenting my outfit." I think a lot of that is like the conditioning of growing up in the Midwest. There's a real thing of like Midwest nice, but what it really looked like in my life was not being able to receive compliments. The second place is, if someone offers to help, what is your immediate response? Mine was, "No, I got it." Now, here's the thing. I do got it most of the time. So like those of us that are, we're just doers.
Right.
I don't really complain. I just get it done, whatever it is. But when someone says, "Can I help?" or "How can I help?" now, and this is still an active practice to practice the art of receiving. If someone says, "How can I help?" I have to give them an answer. So that can be as simple as, "Well, I just posted a new reel on Instagram. I'd love a comment, or if you really like it, maybe share it. Will you go leave a review for my podcast? That actually really, really helps the podcast." So instead of saying, "No, I'm fine, I got it," actually having an answer when someone asks, "How can I help you?" Because how good does it feel when you're the one helping?
Absolutely.
It feels so good. So I would imagine, I always give this analogy, and it helped me too. If someone is offering to help, imagine someone handing you this beautifully gift-wrapped box. And instead of taking it and receiving it and just having that moment of like, "Wow, this feels so good that someone loved me enough to wrap this and give me this beautiful gift," it would be as though they tried to hand it to you and you just drop kick it across the room, right? You're like rejecting this gift that you're being given. So I try to remember that. And even still to this day, I catch myself going into that Superwoman complex of, "Well, I got it." Because usually I do. But do I have to carry it all? Am I actually supposed to carry it all? What is me trying to do it all myself keeping me from, as far as a bigger vision? Because I actually think a lot of us struggle to receive as almost an act of disobedience to our bigger calling.
Whoa, that's good right there. Well, I think that new version of you that receives easily and effortlessly, and they're like, "Yes, yes, yes." You're almost sometimes like in a tug of war with that version of you.
Yeah.
And you fall back to those things that they don't seem like big things, right? Like they feel like the smaller things, like, "Oh, well, I can do it. Like I can." It's like even the door thing. Like when a guy will open up a door for you or something, you're like, "No, I got it. I got it." Now I'm always like, take the door.
That's such a good example too, right?
It's like practicing those things all the time to really step into that version of you, and constantly like, I have this visual in my mind all the time. Like, am I fighting with that old version of me, like to hold on to her?
Yeah.
Like drop it. Because then like the more you have to practice it on a daily basis. It's not like a one-time thing. You're going to accept a compliment and then now you're going to be able to receive more help, more money, all the things. So.
Yes. And I think for me to realize that doesn't take away the part of me I actually really love, which is the get it done again, I don't really complain. I'm just the type of person that steps up. It doesn't weaken that part of me.
Mm-hmm.
But when I can also bring in this idea of surrender and softening into allowing other people to help, I think it allows the vision to expand to where it's supposed to be, because none of us are being given a vision that we're supposed to carry out on our own.
Amen.
We're not supposed to have all the gifts. We're not supposed to have every single thing necessary. Otherwise, we could easily take credit for something that's not ours to take credit for.
Ooh, okay, this is good. When you said that, I got this visual, and I don't know, I'm going to probably butcher it, but in the Bible, it talks about how, like, you know, we are like the hands and feet of Jesus, and like we can't do it alone. Like, so I might be the hand, but you might be the feet. Like, we have to do this together, and that's literally the way that God designed the world to be, like humanity to be, is like us making it happen together. But on that other note, okay, because there's another reason why people try to go at this whole entrepreneurship thing alone. And it's from experiencing rejections, because there's the other side of that. There are people that want to help you, yes, but then there's another part of it where, like, you know, there are people that don't, and you've heard no over and over again. Or maybe like for somebody like me, I just had it embedded like in my DNA that I was rejected and not unwanted because my dad left. And it was seriously like in my DNA because he was abandoned by his dad. So it was generational.
Yep.
And like you're dealing with like super big wounds when it comes to rejection. What would you say for those people that, like, I still struggle with it? You know, I don't like going to events because I'm like, oh, I have to talk to all these people. I love people. But what would you say to that person that's kind of struggling with rejection? They're good at accepting help from people they know love them, but maybe they're scared to put themselves out there to ask, like, hey, will you come on my podcast? Hey, can I go on your podcast? Hey, can I speak at your event? You know?
Yeah. Well, I have my own wounds. I have different wounds.
Right.
So that one doesn't particularly show up in that way. But here's what I have found is that my triggers are always my biggest teachers.
That's good.
And if you are someone who knows you have a really, really big purpose, it's typically, I wish this weren't the case. I just think this is some weird spiritual law that we don't get to shortcut. Wherever we find we're triggered the most, I actually think it's an invitation into our own growth. That often the thing that feels the least comfortable for me is the thing that holds the key to my next evolution. Because again, if it were easy, if it didn't require faith, if it didn't require me to change how I operate at a cellular level, is there real change in that? So I'm not saying that's easy. And I know a lot of women have sister wounds, mother wounds, even just wounds that deal with rejection or feeling abandoned or not included. I actually think that's one of the reasons why I'm called to create community in this way, is to create a different kind of community that when you're ready and you step into it, you feel that it's different. You feel that these female relationships and friendships are actually possible. And I think because I have different wounds, I have my own, but that just is the vision it's like imprinted on my spirit, is just to redefine what those female friendships and relationships look like, because I actually think that's our catalyst to make the impact we're all really supposed to make.
I love that. And I see you doing that. Like for so many women, I love looking at like all these, like you just had your event. When was it?
In August.
Okay, so it was in August. How many people were there?
600 this year. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. And it was so cute and beautiful. Okay, so let's talk about events and like what it takes to actually fill the room with 600 people. I mean, the most people I've had at one of my events is 100, and I had to like give away free tickets. Maybe that's why I don't like it.
Well, and there were those years, right?
Right.
This is, I think I also want to say this is our 7th event.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay, so that's amazing.
It's taken a while.
How does somebody know that there's somebody to put on an event? Like, you know what I mean? That they're called to put on an event.
Okay, I just think it's one of those things that you know.
If you have a desire.
Even the things that people say are a challenge, or one of the challenges that makes them feel like, oh, I never want to do that again. Those things don't bother me. I love to think about, okay, we had 600 women in the room this year. What does it look like? Who do I need to become in order to have 1,000? So I do think that obviously having the right team around you, I'm not doing this by myself. I have an amazing team, an amazing business partner, but you just know, I wake up and I think about gathering people together. Now, I'm actually much more of an introvert. So
are you really?
I recharge alone. After even yesterday doing like some podcasts, I had to go and just be in my own energy to recharge. So I don't think you have to be like a super extrovert. I actually think that makes me a more powerful connector because I can see the introverts and I know what they're feeling.
Right.
So I just really love to gather people together, but I love to facilitate experiences. So I think you know in your heart that I also just see how to create community.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't feel like I have to really overthink it or even putting that many people in a room. It's just kind of my natural way of operating. Not to say that I can't teach it to other people, right? But I do think that if you have that natural gift of facilitating, bringing people together, there's such a need for it right now. Mm-hmm. And then we need amazing speakers and people who don't want to put on their own events to come and pour into the community.
I
right?
like putting on events. You know, it's funny. Like I love the feeling of having events. We're having a huge little girls' party for all of Charlie's friends.
Oh my gosh,
I do like facilitating community in a very controlled way.
Well, same.
In a very controlled way. Okay, so but it brings me to my ask about community because people, I think, tend to go, I want to have an event. Mm-hmm. Let me sell the event. And then I'm going to build the community from there, which I think you got to like build the community now. Like everybody should be building a community.
Yeah.
So where does somebody start?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'll even just share a little bit of what it looked like pre-Powerhouse Women event, because I think this is important for people to get. And the way I always define community, because I think this is important too, is when I'm building my audience, which I still do, I have strategies in my business to build my audience. I'm really asking myself the question, okay, how do I get more people to connect with me? Mm-hmm. Want to know what my brand is doing, want to listen to my podcast. How do I get people just interested and then connected with what I'm doing? But building my community goes a level deeper. In building community, I'm now asking, how do I get more of those people to connect with each other?
Yes.
Because the other thing that I think is not common is we sold those 600 tickets, filled a room, we filled every event we've had with an email list that still is only around about 15,000, which is small for our industry, for other people who are having events of that size. And we've always had a small audience, but that I never saw that as a problem. Yes. I just knew I had to think differently. So the reason why building the community is important is you can do so much more when you have a group of people who feel like they belong, where they know they can meet other people like them in the space that you've curated, when they feel a sense of loyalty to the brand because they feel like it's theirs. They don't feel like this is Lindsey's event or Lindsey's community. They feel like it's theirs because it is. The organic reach, the organic referrals, the way that people champion your brand or whatever it is that you're doing, your e-course, your event, is unmatched. You can't buy it. You can't do enough Facebook ads to really create that kind of momentum. So I've just prioritized that from the beginning because I had to. I didn't have a big audience. So early, this was even when I was in network marketing and starting to realize, okay, there's something else for me. And I just had this craving to connect with women. So I started hosting these little lunches. Oh. They were called Ladies Who Lunch.
That's so cute.
And you know, sometimes 2 people would show up, sometimes 20. And I did have one lunch where no one showed. And I ate lunch by myself. And it didn't really discourage me. I was sort of like, well, okay. You know, again, knowing from network marketing, rejection is part of it. It was just this idea, this vision that I had that I needed. I was looking for community with other women who were really ambitious that weren't necessarily a part of my network marketing company, because I wanted to have more of just the overarching conversation of how do we support ourselves in this? Because it can feel lonely when you're the most ambitious person in your friend group or the most ambitious person in your family. I just wanted to create relationships with other people who were feeling that same way. So I prioritized the community element and just creating spaces for people to connect with each other from day one without realizing that's even what I was doing. But that is how we went from, this vision of 25 people to, okay, maybe 100 would show up, and they did year one, to doubling that. Even in the pandemic, we still had an event. It was online. But that year is actually the year our community grew the most, because we really focused on creating connection in the ways that we could when people were more disconnected than ever. And so I feel like this is the hill I will die on, is just championing community, especially if you have a business and a brand, because I know what can happen in the long term, but it's not the quick and sexy overnight result because it's real. It's genuine. The relationships that you build like that do take time. And so I actually think the brands that are not prioritizing community in the way I just described it, connecting people with each other in meaningful ways, I think those brands are going to get left behind, or at least leave money on the table.
Right. Wow. Okay. So everybody listening in right now can start creating community I think the easiest way is connect people you know. Like, okay, hey, I have a podcast listener that's a doctor. I have a podcast listener that has gut health issues. I'm going to connect you to. Yep. You know, like connection is like the easiest way. Like start telling your community about each other because you're the one getting the DMs. Like you're the one hearing from all these people. They just don't know yet. You know, put them in a Facebook group, like really start to teach them how to connect too. Right.
And that's the other piece is we would think that we know as human beings how to connect with each other, but then you remember we do all have wounds, or we all have fears, or we have stories that keep us from being able to show up as our authentic selves, which prevents us from actually connecting. So I look at my role as the facilitator to be the one, number one, to go first and be vulnerable and show that people don't actually want to connect with me less for my vulnerability. They want to connect with me more because they feel seen. And to create reasons for people to connect where you just take the awkwardness off the table right away. Because if I'm telling everyone in this little breakout room on Zoom to share this thing, people naturally follow suit. So again, if you're the one creating events or creating community, give people a little bit of direction. That's all it takes, is some really intentional questions, some curated connection opportunities that they might not seek out themselves just because they're scared, or this could be like their first time walking into an event or a room with really powerful women. So I just really think through all those different nuances, because I know now that we're to the point of 7 years of events, I have women who've come along the journey with me. So even though I'm not in the room making sure everyone gets to know each other and meet each other, there are women who I know are showing up and carrying forward the intention of the brand. They're representing what we actually stand for. And so I don't have to worry that the newbies might walk in the room and feel scared. We know that they're supported by hundreds of women who, whether they're part of the official like event volunteer staff or not, they're looking for the people who want connection and just don't know where to plug in. Yeah. So I think that's the part that you can't really speed that up. It takes time to really cultivate that level of community. But now we can go deep. We can really focus on widening the reach because we've got that foundation. But had I tried to go really wide and grow this huge, big community day one, I don't think I would have been able to keep my arms around it and keep that authenticity piece to it.
So good.
Yeah.
So I was just thinking as you were talking, when you were saying questions, you know, facilitate them, help guide them to get to know each other. Last year, I think it was last summer, we were walking in Wisconsin. Was it?
Yeah.
Was I?
Yeah.
I'm like, yes, we were on some dirt road.
We were on, that was probably Wisconsin then.
Yeah. Okay. Chris, Lori, you and I. And I was like right in the middle of, I had just gotten my I think I had just gotten a book deal.
I think you had. Yeah. Because I remember talking about it.
Or I was like pitching, like we were in the process of like pitching the thing. And what were the questions that Chris asked us? Remember we were walking, you were going through some stuff and we were all going through some stuff.
Always going through some stuff, right? So I think what we were doing was their exercise called the Power 9, where you share the 3 things you're grateful for.
Yes.
Was it that? 3 things you're excited about, 3 things you're like calling in or you want to manifest or all of that.
Yes, that's what it was.
Yes.
Okay.
Which even that exercise, and that's something that's really powerful to do as a family with your significant other, because I think it just makes you also pause every day and really intentionally create the energy that you want. Even if we think about like connection, the most important connection to me is between my husband and I, or between the people that I love. And so I think that was it.
Yeah, that was it. And it was just making me think that like, even just that little walk, I felt closer to you afterwards, because you just get to know each other. Like, and it's like, wow. I mean, what did we do? Like 5 miles? It was a walk. But had we just gone on and just talked about what, you know, the past, what would we have talked about? It's like, it's so refreshing to be around people that like are like, here's what we're gonna.
Yes.
This is where we're going. Let's talk about where we're going.
Well, and honestly, so what happened, I don't know how that conversation went to me sharing just really vulnerably something that was going on in my family dynamic that you could really relate to. And I think it's important to point out, it was something that I was actually feeling really vulnerable about. And you and I are friends, but we had never like gone super deep on that, or it was even something, and it's still going on in my family dynamic today, that feels embarrassing, because it's like, gosh, do other families have like big separations like this of just huge misunderstandings? And that felt really vulnerable to share, especially around a group of people who I really look up to. I see all of us, because this is our public persona,
right?
Always focusing on like possibility and what we're working on, which is just as much a part of my personality as this very real hurt that was happening in my family, and actually still is today. And to be welcomed and to have that conversation just nurtured by people who got it and weren't just pouring more, oh, poor me onto it. It was more like, hey, that does suck. And I've experienced it too. And here's what helped me. And just know that you're loved. That's really all it was. That was ultimately what felt so connected in that conversation. Wasn't us sharing, oh, here's what I'm grateful for today and all the things that I'm working on. It was, here's the thing that's really hard right now.
So true.
And that's the thing that even now I'm challenging myself to do. I think it's harder and harder the further we go along, where there is just more great stuff to share. For people listening, especially if they're at the beginning, to know that I do still doubt myself. I still wonder. And I actually wouldn't want to lose that, because then I lose connection with the people I want to serve. I'm not trying to get to a point where I never doubt myself or wonder, am I really good enough to do this next big thing? Because the moment I do, the moment I lose the thing that actually makes me great at what I do, which is that connection to the people I'm serving.
That's so good. Oh, I always say, like, if you always think you're supposed to be in the room, or you always like are 100% sure you're supposed to be doing this thing, then you probably need to go to therapy, because
probably look into that.
I don't trust those people, because it's just like, that's a little bit off, because it's part of what makes us human, I think, is just to be like in that like little like, you know, I don't know, it's not yin and yang, but you know what I mean? It's like having a little bit of like, I know I got this, but also like, do I got this? You know?
Yeah. Well, it just means we're growing, right?
Yeah.
Because the moment I step into a room that it makes me wonder, okay, do I have what it takes? Or I step into a goal that I wonder, do I have what it takes? That's actually, I heard this, and this rocked me, that until I'm stepping into that point, I'm actually not even relying on faith at all. Because I'm only operating within the zone of like, oh, I've got this. I'm amazing. I can handle this. And you and I both are really talented people. We can handle a lot. But does our faith actually show up until I step beyond that point of, oh, I got this. The point that I'm like, do I got this? Is the point where I get to put my guard down and still show up with the confidence of knowing that I am gifted and I am supported on a much bigger level, but also realizing that it's not supposed to all come from me. Yeah.
Okay, so give me some practical steps of what it looks like for people listening in right now that need to ask for help, that need to start collaborating to grow their business, to grow their brand.
Okay, I think we've actually already said all of them. So let's give people like the summary, because it starts with double the vision or shrink the time until that point that makes you go, I don't know how I'm going to do that. That's step one. Then, and I love the book Who Not How. I think you've read that book too. Then start to look at it through the lens of, who else do I need? In order to make this happen, who do I need? What area do I need to accept help or ask for help? You're going to know whether for you it's harder to ask for the help or to receive it. Maybe it's both. And I think just really starting to look at, when you get yourself to that point of, can I really do this? It should feel like you should almost want to puke. It's got to feel like that much resistance. Ask yourself, who do I need? And even though you might not know the person, you might say, well, I need someone who's really good at launch strategy. In order to double my business in the next year, I've got to just really put myself either in a mentorship position with someone who can teach me this, or I've got to ask my friend who's really great at this to sit down and walk me through, okay, how can I make this a reality? So I really think it starts with that. How can you put yourself in the position of like, I don't see my way to how this is going to happen? And then ask yourself, not how am I going to make that happen, but who do I need in order to help me make it happen?
And sometimes you have to invest in order
I almost always have to invest.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. It's like not sometimes, right?
I really wish I say this all the time. I'm sure my husband wishes as well that I were motivated, just woke up naturally to get out of my own way without having to be really uncomfortably invested financially. But that's part of it too, is knowing where do you take yourself out of the game? And if I'm not financially invested, I'm so much more likely to quit when I'm feeling that really intense resistance, which is supposed to come with any big transformation that you're undergoing.
Absolutely. I know people don't realize that, like, when you have skin in the game, you show up as a new person because you're like, okay, I have a lot to lose. When a lot of people are walking around right now, they're going after their brands with nothing to lose, which is great because you're like, woo, I could build, I could do the things. But then you can also, like you said, take yourself out of the game when you have nothing to lose. I don't have a community to answer to, I could just not show up for the next month and it's going to be fine.
Yes.
But when you've invested, you have employees, you have mentors that you've invested a lot of money into. It's like, oh no, I'm showing up because I want my ROI.
And sometimes it's like mascara running down my face. Like I'm wiping my eyes like I'm going to show up. It doesn't always feel good, but I'm always so proud of myself on the other side. That's the thing, is I had never really, until I wrote that book, I had never challenged myself to that level. I don't think I realized how much the restlessness that I was feeling came from the fact that I was only operating within what I could control. The only risk I would take is the amount of risk I knew I could control. And so eventually it got to the point where it didn't matter how much outside validation or accolades I was getting. I knew there was more and I couldn't unknow it. And it was going to start to affect my relationships, my family, my health, if I didn't step into that feeling.
Absolutely. Living a safe life. I don't know anybody who has lived a safe life and is really happy.
Yeah.
So we're talking about investing, and we only have, we've got to talk about the other side of not only investing in yourself, but investing in other assets. You are your biggest asset, but you have made some incredible money and you guys have been able to become real estate investors. So talk to me about what that looked like for you guys to invest in your first property and all the thoughts that are going on in your mind.
So my husband and I were just having this conversation the other day, kind of laughing about it because I'm the one who's more organized. So I kind of even just like handle our finances. So we've been married 13 years. He's like, I always just thought you were the more conservative one. So I thought it was probably better for you to handle that. And he's like, now looking back, you're the one who's not reckless, but I am willing to risk big, knowing that I'm usually operating from a gut knowing that I can't explain. So I remember being in a season where we knew that we wanted to start stepping into that, investing in other assets. We both love travel and we love the idea of having homes that we can, use. And also they're these cash flowing assets. And there's this cute little town just north of Phoenix where I live, and it's just magical. It was like the first time I visited, I just knew that it was a place where like my nervous system felt really nurtured, and that was something I really, really needed. I just remember we booked a cabin for this weekend getaway, and I just knew that we would own one there someday, right?
Yeah.
This was August. By October, I think it was September, I was in this Facebook group and I saw this picture. It was for sale by owner. And I just knew. I really just said like, oh, that's our cabin. Oh, I wonder how we're going to get it. So I think also, as women, we are pretty intuitive. I think we have these strengths that until that point, I didn't realize how applicable they were to all these other goals that we had. Because my husband's business is real estate investing and he's pursuing that now. But I have made some really great buys for us just by really listening to that. So what was cool about it is it felt like such a stretch. It felt like, I don't see how we're going to make this happen, because at the same time, I was also getting ready to invest in our mutual friend Lori's company that she was launching. And I remember that being such an expansive season for us because Now let's pair this with everything we've been talking about. It felt so far out of the range of what I was comfortable with. I didn't even know myself to like be the type of person who invested and risked that big to do, because I was asking myself better questions, which was not either or, like which one do I have to choose? I kept sitting with this question and praying over this question. I feel like we're supposed to do both. Just show me the path, show me the way. And this is where who, not how.
Yeah.
We started to have conversations with people in our life who knew things about how mortgages worked, knew about how we could, really use some of the equity we had in our primary home to do some different things. So it was interesting just to realize how I knew deep down that those were steps we were supposed to take. We were supposed to start sowing our, the money we had earned into other things, but I didn't see how. And it was by having conversations with different who's that had been down that path before that it made it completely possible. And we did. Within the span of about a month, we closed on our first rental property. We've had it for 3 years. It's doing amazing. Like, it still cash flows really, really well. And I invested 6 figures into a friend's vision. And that had never been something that was a possibility for me until I started to ask myself those bigger questions. So it's everything we've been talking about today, right? Even like what led us down that journey. And we didn't know. We had to really start to learn the language, learn the people, learn how things worked. But once you go down that road and you start to really experience building wealth on a different scale, it really changes how you start to see everything. So we really quickly, from that point on, now we have 3 properties. We're living in one right now, but we have a long-term rental, a short-term rental, and then the property we live in right now will be the next short-term rental. And we're planning the goal is to invest in 1 a year.
That's awesome.
From now till whenever we want to stop that. But even that is a goal that I don't see exactly how that's going to happen. I don't know exactly how we're going to make that a reality. But for me, I know I operate best when the goal feels like that, right? It feels like I don't see my way here. It's not coming from ego. I don't feel like I'm doing this for self-serving reasons, right? Because we have to kind of like, I think, pray over the goals that we're setting to make sure that they really are coming from the right place. But from there, I just keep asking, okay, who have I not met yet? Who do I need to know who's going to teach me something that I haven't learned, and open up the possibilities for what my life could look like and what our impact could look like.
Wow. Well, I'm so proud of you.
Thanks.
Wow. You've helped so many people over the last decade, and just who you show up like in real life, on your podcast, on social media. You're the real deal. Just teaching people to be brave, to go after their dreams, to be vulnerable, and to take up space in this world too. So just thank you for being that woman for me. You're always just like that shining bright light in my life. So I'm super grateful to know you. And I loved our conversation on the podcast today. So where can everybody find you?
Yes. So if you love podcasts, I love our podcast, and it's one of my favorite places to show up. So it's just Powerhouse Women on Instagram. It's Powerhouse_women, and everything else I'm sure will be linked in the show notes. But I would love to connect. And we do have this amazing event. It's coming up again in August 2024. And I'm very biased, so take this for what it is, but it is my favorite 2-day span of the entire year. It's what fills me up and keeps me going, and it's filled with women who actually do want to collaborate and believe that we're not meant to do business or life alone.
So good. Thank you so much. And for everybody listening in right now, comment, tell me your favorite part of this episode. Ask any questions that you might have for Lindsey. Take a screenshot of this and post it on your social. Thank you so much for listening in.